Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be going over a few welding mistakes, a couple of welding tips and tricks, and then also some troubleshooting that the new welder might run into. This video is going to be designed for having that sort of a person in mind, someone just getting started in welding, or someone who's doing some DIY stuff at home and they don't have a ton of experience welding things. So, mistake number one. This mistake is going to be pretty obvious, but it might not be obvious to someone just starting out in welding. And that's going to be metal prep. And what do I mean by that? I mean actually prepping the metal surface that you're going to be welding. So on the table here, we have two different examples. One is of a post that I have ground off the end of and prepped the surface by removing the powder coating. And I've also taken the time to use an angle grinder to prep the surface of this plate that we're going to be welding to the bottom of this post. And the other example is going to be pretty much the same thing, just an unprepped post and an unprepped plate. Okay, first up, we have our unprepped material. I did not take any time to grind or prep this post or the plate. So step number one, we're going to ground our workpiece with the clamp, and then we're going to try to weld this. So, as you can see, it does weld, but in order for the metal to pretty much go in between the two pieces, we have to first break through the barrier of the powder coating, as well as the barrier of zinc that they coat these plates in. It's doable, but it's not practical. I think that in the long run, you're going to be spending much more time cleaning up this mess to get it to look good than you would taking a few seconds to prep the metal. And also too, having these different chemicals in here can potentially contaminate the weld and cause porosity, which is basically too much air inside the weld. You kind of get little bubbles, and it just creates a weaker weld potentially. So this is definitely a mistake that I could see somebody making. All right, so now we are going to weld these two things together that are prepped. Off camera, I just put the clamp at the end of this piece, which would also be a really good tip, is to put your ground cable onto the piece that you're welding. I don't always do that because our tables are made out of metal. And as long as you have good contact in between your piece and your metal table, you can get away with it. But that's something to keep in mind. So hopefully by watching this and viewing what it looks like afterwards, you guys will be able to see that it's worth prepping the metal. We just got done doing a little tack here on this, and you can clearly see here that it's a lot cleaner. I don't know if you were able to pick up on the different sounds or even be able to really see it. It's kind of hard to convey that in a video, but I can tell you from experience that this is a much more enjoyable process than trying to weld something that's not prepped. And I would trust this one over this one, just because we have less amount of contamination in this weld. So the next mistake that a beginner might make is your voltage. Are you too hot or are you too cold? Are you somewhere in between? So to demonstrate this, we're going to be using these two pieces of 2-inch pipe, and I'm going to weld them. One I'm going to weld pretty hot, and the other I'm going to weld too cold. And you should be able to see inside the pipe when we're done, and that should be a pretty good demonstration of a piece that's too hot versus too cold. So this was a great example of it being too hot. And as you saw, it was going okay for a little bit, but I also did intentionally put a little bit up at the top. I kind of left it hanging there, and that was kind of to demonstrate the quickness at which you can burn through material while you're too hot. In other words, a better way to describe it would be like kind of like rising and falling. As you're welding, you can, through my point of view, you can see the two metals begin to melt. And as you're moving your contact tip and the nozzle back and forth, you can get a good sense of them kind of bonding together. But when you're too hot, the bead that you're making has a tendency to kind of fall a little bit. And when you're too cold, it has a tendency to bubble up and rise. So it's going to take practice, but that's a good indication of being too hot is when you see the bead kind of falling or, you know, melting, in this case, melting through the pipe. So this one was clearly set too low. And a good way that you're going to be able to tell almost instantly is you're not going to have a really good arc. You know, and another good way or a good sign would be that it's not wanting to stick to either one of the pieces that you're trying to stick together. Setting your voltage too low is not a good thing. You can have the appearance of it being welded, such as this, but you can clearly see here that we don't have very good penetration on either piece here, and these would pretty easily be able to come apart, and that's not good. That's not what we're trying to do.
Wait, what? That's terrible.
Yeah, that's not what we want.
This would be something to avoid as a beginner, is having it too low or too hot. And really, it's hard to describe it and show it in a video, but I think practice is key with this. Just find yourself some different thick and thin material and just play around with it. Try to figure out the right setting for your machine. Every machine and setup is a little bit different, so it's just going to come down to practicing and figuring out what's right for what application. So that concludes the basic how to weld video, the tips and tricks. I know we didn't cover a ton of stuff, but we wanted to keep this real simple, short, clean, and basic. Really appreciate you tuning in, and we're looking forward to doing more videos. If you guys have any ideas or any comments about today's video, any questions even, feel free to leave them in the comments. We'd be glad to review them and get back to you guys. We appreciate you tuning in, and we're looking forward to seeing you next week.